Chen never believed in aliens, at least not until the night they took her. The summer air hung thick and heavy over Stanford University's campus as she walked home from the quantum physics lab. At 26, she was the youngest postdoctoral researcher in the department's history, and tonight's breakthrough had kept her working well past midnight. The equations dancing through her mind might just revolutionize humanity's understanding of dark matter. The campus paths were empty save for the occasional whisper of wind through the ancient oaks. Sarah pulled her jacket tighter, quickening her pace as an inexplicable chill crept up her spine. The rational part of her mind dismissed it as simple fatigue, but some primitive instinct screamed that something was wrong. That's when the lights appeared. At first, she mistook them for campus security drones, 3 perfect spheres of softly pulsing blue light, floating in a triangular formation perhaps 50 feet above the ground. But as they descended, the air began to crackle with otherworldly energy. The lights cast no shadows, seeming to bend reality itself around them. Sarah's scientific mind catalyzed into overdrive, analyzing every detail even as her legs refused to move. The spheres emitted no sound, yet she felt a deep thrumming in her bones that made her teeth ache. The air temperature dropped precipitously, her breath suddenly visible in the summer night. "This is impossible," she whispered, fumbling for her phone to document the phenomenon. Before she could unlock it, the device grew scorching hot. She dropped it with a yelp, watching in disbelief as it melted into a puddle of silicon and rare earth metals. The blue lights converged, forming a single brilliant point directly overhead. A beam of impossible darkness shot down, enveloping her in what felt like liquid night. Sarah tried to scream, but the sound died in her throat as reality twisted sideways. When her consciousness returned, she found herself in what could only be described as a laboratory, though one that defied every law of physics she knew. The walls seemed to breathe, shifting with patterns that hurt her eyes to look at directly. The air itself felt wrong, as if it contained elements beyond the periodic table. They appeared then, her captors. Their forms seemed to change with each blink of her eyes, but the impression that stayed with her was of tall, graceful beings with skin like polished obsidian and too many joints in their limbs. They moved with an unsettling fluidity, as if gravity was merely a suggestion rather than a law. Chen. One of them spoke, though she heard the words inside her mind rather than with her ears. "Your species has advanced more quickly than anticipated. Your recent work threatens the cosmic order." "My work?" Sarah managed to reply, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. "The dark matter research? You have glimpsed truths your kind is not ready to comprehend," another being responded. "The equations you derive today would lead humanity to discoveries that would destabilize entire galaxies. The universe has rules, Chen. Rules that must be maintained. We could learn to use the knowledge responsibly," Sarah argued, her mind racing. "Humanity deserves the chance to understand the cosmos." "Your optimism is noted," the first being communicated. "But the Council of Cosmic Constants has already ruled. The sequence cannot be altered. Order must be preserved." Sarah felt a cold certainty settle over her. "You're going to kill me. Your physical form will cease, yes, but your consciousness will be preserved in the Universal Archive, your insights studied by species far older than your sun. Earth will notice I'm missing," Sarah said, hoping to appeal to their apparent desire for order. "They'll investigate." The beings exchanged what might have been glances. "Your disappearance will be explained by conventional means. A tragic laboratory accident. No evidence of our intervention will remain." Sarah squared her shoulders, years of scientific training helping her maintain composure even now. "Then I have one request. Let me send a message to my family. Something to give them closure." "That would violate protocol," the second being stated. "The sequence must be maintained." The air in the chamber began to shimmer with an opalescent light. Sarah felt her body growing lighter, her consciousness expanding even as her physical form began to dissolve. Her last thoughts were not of fear, but of the equations she'd discovered, the ones that had sealed her fate. She focused all her remaining energy on burning them into her consciousness. hoping that somehow, someday, humanity would rediscover them and understand what had happened to her. The beings watched dispassionately as Sarah Chen's physical form transformed into pure energy, her consciousness carefully extracted and catalogued in the Universal Archive. They did not notice that in her final moments, she had managed to encode a message in the quantum fluctuations of her dissolving body. A message that would eventually be detected by the very equipment she had helped design back on Earth. In her lab at Stanford, Sarah's final equations remained on the whiteboard, waiting to be discovered by her colleagues the next morning. And in the depths of space, ancient machinery hummed as it began fabricating evidence of a tragic laboratory accident that never happened. The cosmic order had been preserved, or so they thought, but they had made 3 critical mistakes. They had underestimated humanity's ability to detect quantum anomalies. They had not considered the implications of Sarah's brilliant colleagues investigating her disappearance, and most importantly, they had failed to account for the sheer tenacity of the human spirit when faced with the loss of one of their own. The war that would follow would shake the very foundations of the universe itself. Dr. James Morrison stared at the quantum fluctuation readings for the 100th time, his coffee long since gone cold. 3 months had passed since Sarah Chen's supposed laboratory accident, but something about the official story had never sat right with him. As her mentor and research partner, he knew Sarah had been too methodical, too careful, to make the kind of mistake that could lead to such a catastrophic equipment failure. "You need to see this," called Dr. Elena Rodriguez from her workstation. Her voice held an edge he'd never heard before. "The pattern analysis from Sarah's last experiment. It's not random noise." James hurried over, his heart pounding. They'd been running continuous scans of the laboratory since Sarah's death, looking for any anomalies that might explain what had really happened that night. The university administration had tried to shut down their investigation weeks ago, but they'd continued in secret, running the sensors during off hours. Elena's screen showed a complex quantum signature, one that seemed to pulse with an almost deliberate rhythm. "It's encoded," she whispered. "Look at the Fibonacci sequence embedded in the pattern. This isn't natural." James felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. "Can you decode it?" "Already working on it." Elena's fingers flew across the keyboard, applying various cryptographic algorithms to the quantum data. "Sarah and I used to play with quantum encryption techniques during lunch breaks. She always said that quantum states were the perfect medium for hiding messages, if you knew exactly where to look." The lab's supercomputer hummed as it processed the calculations. Minutes stretched into hours as various decryption attempts failed. Just as they were about to give up for the night, the computer chimed. The message that appeared on the screen was short, but it changed everything. "Taken by Cosmic Council. Violation of universal law. Earth in danger. Equations are key. SC." "My God," James breathed. "She found a way to leave us a message while they were." He couldn't finish the sentence. Elena was already pulling up Sarah's final whiteboard photos. The equations she was working on that night, everyone assumed they were nonsense because they seemed to violate fundamental laws of physics. But what if they weren't wrong? What if they were too right? The next few weeks became a blur of secret meetings and clandestine research. They brought in Dr. Wei Zhang, a quantum computing specialist who had worked with SETI, and Dr. Amara Okafor, whose work on theoretical propulsion systems had drawn attention from space agencies worldwide. Together, they began to unravel the true implications of Sarah's final equations. They weren't just about dark matter. They were a key to understanding how advanced civilizations manipulated the very fabric of spacetime. They killed her because she figured out their technology, Amara concluded one night, after they'd finally managed to reproduce some of Sarah's calculations. "These equations, they're like a cosmic Rosetta Stone. They expose how the universe really works, beyond the simplified models we've been using." The breakthrough came 6 months after Sarah's death. Using her equations, they managed to detect the alien presence, a vast network of artificial structures hidden in the dark matter between galaxies. The beings who had taken Sarah weren't just visitors. They were self-appointed guardians of cosmic law, enforcing their version of universal order across countless star systems. When they took their evidence to the highest levels of government, the response was unprecedented. Within days, a classified coalition of international space agencies and military organizations was formed. Operation Cosmic Justice, they called it, though everyone involved knew it was really about revenge. The planet's finest minds were secretly recruited. Military budgets were diverted through shadow programs. In underground facilities across the globe, engineers began adapting Sarah's equations into working technology. They thought they could just take one of us, General Diana Hayes said at the first full coalition meeting, that they could murder a brilliant young scientist and we'd accept their manufactured explanation. They don't understand humanity at all. The first prototype ship was ready 18 months later. Built in a hidden facility beneath the Atacama Desert, it incorporated technology that would have seemed like magic just 2 years earlier. Sarah's equations had opened doors that humanity had never even known existed. Dr. Morrison was there for the first test flight. As he watched the ship rise silently into the night sky, bending light around itself in ways that defied conventional physics, he thought of Sarah. She would have loved to see this, humanity taking its first true steps into the cosmic arena. But the ship wasn't built for exploration. Its quantum drives and dark matter sensors had a single purpose: to find those who had murdered Sarah Chen and bring them to justice. As the vessel disappeared into the upper atmosphere, Elena stood beside him, her tablet displaying the latest sensor data. "We've mapped their primary transit corridors," she said quietly. "Their entire system of cosmic governance depends on being able to move quickly between galaxies. Thanks to Sarah's equations, we now know exactly how they do it. And they have no idea we're coming," James added, watching the quantum readings that showed the ship successfully entering what they now called dark space, the hidden dimensions where the Cosmic Council operated. In orbit, humanity's first interstellar warship activated its full array of systems, all based on the very knowledge the Council had killed Sarah to suppress. As it accelerated toward its first target, the crew could almost imagine they heard Sarah's voice in the quantum harmonics of the drive system. They thought they could bury the truth. They thought humanity would remain ignorant. They were wrong. The war for cosmic justice was about to begin. The first battle wasn't supposed to happen at Europa. Humanity's prototype warship, the HSS Vengeance, was conducting a final series of tests in the Jupiter system when they detected it, a Cosmic Council vessel emerging from dark space. Captain Maya Santos had only a fraction of a second to make a decision that would change the course of human history. "All hands to battle stations," she ordered, her voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. "Initiate dark matter camouflage. Let's see if Sarah's theories work in practice." The ship's quantum drive hummed as it bent reality around them, using principles derived from Sarah Chen's final equations to hide not just from conventional sensors, but from the very fabric of space-time itself. On the bridge, the crew held their breath as the alien vessel passed within kilometers of their position. The Council ship was beautiful in a terrifying way, a crystalline structure that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the human mind could process. It moved with the same unsettling fluidity Sarah had described in her encoded message, ignoring the conventional laws of physics. "They're conducting some kind of scan," reported Dr. Kenzo Tanaka, their chief scientist. His hands flew over the quantum interface. "They're looking for dark matter anomalies. They know something's wrong, but they can't pinpoint us." Captain Santos allowed herself a grim smile. "Then let's introduce ourselves properly. Weapons status: dark matter disruptors at full charge. Quantum torpedoes armed. We're ready, Captain." She took a deep breath, thinking of the months of preparation, the countless simulations they'd run. But this was no drill. This was humanity's first chance to strike back at those who had murdered one of their own. "Target their propulsion systems," she ordered. "Fire when ready." The HSS Vengeance decloaked, its weapons already firing. The Council ship never had a chance to react. Dark matter disruptors tore through its exotic shielding, while quantum torpedoes, designed using Sarah's equations, disrupted the very principles that allowed it to exist in normal space. The alien vessel's crystalline structure shattered, its crew of cosmic enforcers ejected into the void. As emergency beacons activated, Captain Santos gave her next order: "Recover any survivors. It's time they learned that humanity can enforce some rules of our own. The interrogation of the captured council members revealed something unexpected: fear. These beings, who had so casually ended Sarah Chen's life, were terrified by humanity's sudden leap in technological understanding. "You don't comprehend the forces you're meddling with," one of them communicated telepathically. "The Council has maintained cosmic order for billions of years. Your species was never meant to advance this quickly. You should have thought of that before you murdered Dr. Chen," Dr. Tanaka replied coldly. "Now you're going to tell us everything we want to know about Council infrastructure, defensive capabilities, and command structure." The information they extracted proved invaluable. The Council's power was vast but not infinite. They maintained their authority through a network of dark matter installations hidden throughout the galaxy, coordinating their enforcement of cosmic law through quantum-entangled communications. Word of the battle spread quickly through both human and Council channels. On Earth, Operation Cosmic Justice accelerated its timeline. More ships were rushed into production, each incorporating improvements based on data from the Europa engagement. The Council's response was swift and arrogant. A delegation of senior members appeared in orbit around Earth, their massive vessel making no attempt at concealment. "This is your only warning," their message boomed in the minds of every human on the planet. "Cease your aggression and surrender your dark matter technology, or face extinction. You have 24 hours to comply." They didn't expect humanity's answer to come in the form of 30 dark matter torpedoes, launched simultaneously from hidden bases around the globe. The Council ship's destruction lit up Earth's sky like a second sun. "So much for negotiations," General Hayes remarked as she watched the debris burn up in the atmosphere. "Signal the fleet. Operation Cosmic Justice is now in full effect." Across the solar system, humanity's new warships emerged from their hidden bases. The HSS Vengeance led a battle group toward the nearest Council installation, while other vessels began systematic attacks on Council infrastructure throughout the galaxy. But the real masterstroke came from Dr. Elena Rodriguez. Using principles hidden in Sarah's equations, she found a way to disrupt the Council's quantum-entangled communications. For the first time in billions of years, their perfect network of cosmic control began to show cracks. "Sarah's last gift to us," she explained to Dr. Morrison as they watched the quantum interference patterns spread across their monitors. "She didn't just leave us the technology to fight them. She showed us their fundamental weakness. They're so dependent on their network, on their rigid structure of control, that they never considered someone might find a way to break it." The Council's response was predictably brutal. Fleets of crystalline ships emerged from dark space, bringing weapons that could unmake reality itself. But humanity had lost its fear of them. Each Council ship destroyed, each installation dismantled, was another step toward justice for Sarah Chen. As battles raged across the galaxy, Dr. Morrison made another discovery in Sarah's quantum signature, a final message, encrypted so deeply it had taken months to decode. "They think order comes from control, from rules imposed from above. But the true order of the universe comes from understanding, from knowledge freely shared. Their way is ending. A new cosmic age is beginning." The war had only just begun, but humanity had already achieved something the Council had thought impossible. We had broken their aura of invincibility. The next phase would determine not just the fate of humanity, but the very nature of order in the universe itself. The Battle of the Carina Nebula would later be called the turning point of the war, though at the time it felt more like a desperate last stand. 6 months into the conflict, the Council had finally shed its bureaucratic facade. Gone were the pretenses of cosmic law and order, replaced by a raw desperation to maintain control. Their forces had converged on humanity's forward base in the Carina Nebula, bringing weapons that could tear stars apart. Admiral Maya Santos, recently promoted after the Europa victory, stood on the bridge of the HSS Vengeance, watching the quantum readings with growing concern. "They've brought their world breakers," she announced to the assembled fleet commanders. Exactly as the intelligence suggested they would. The world breakers were the Council's ultimate weapons, massive constructs that could manipulate dark matter on a stellar scale. They had already destroyed 3 star systems in their attempt to crush humanity's expansion into the galaxy. But this time, humanity was ready for them. "Execute Operation Looking Glass," Admiral Santos ordered. Across the nebula, hundreds of quantum beacons activated simultaneously. Each one had been precisely positioned based on Sarah Chen's equations, creating a complex web of dark matter interference patterns. The Council ships, so dependent on their dark matter technology, suddenly found themselves trapped in a maze of their own making. They thought Sarah's equations were just about understanding dark matter. Dr. Elena Rodriguez explained from her position at Quantum Control. They never realized she had found a way to turn their own technology against them. The battle that followed would be studied for generations to come. Council worldbreakers, unable to fully control their weapons in the quantum interference field, began to tear themselves apart. Human ships, using modified versions of the Council's own technology, struck from multiple dimensions simultaneously. But the Council's desperation made them even more dangerous. They began activating ancient weapons that had been sealed away for billions of years, devices that could rewrite the fundamental constants of the universe itself. "They're trying to change the very laws of physics in this sector," Dr. Tanaka reported, his voice tense. "If they succeed, our ships won't be able to function. Neither will any form of complex life." That's when Dr. James Morrison, monitoring the battle from Earth, made a crucial discovery. Hidden in the quantum fluctuations of the Council's weapons was a pattern he recognized, the same type of encoding Sarah had used in her final message. "It's not just us," he realized, quickly sharing his findings with the fleet. "There are other species out there, ones the Council has suppressed. They've hidden messages in the quantum fabric of space itself, waiting for someone to find them." As if in response to this revelation, new ships began appearing at the edges of the battle. They were unlike anything either humanity or the Council had built of vessels that seemed to be grown rather than constructed, using technologies that defied categorization. "This is the coalition of free species," a new voice echoed in everyone's minds. But unlike the Council's harsh telepathic communications, this was gentle, almost musical. "We have waited eons for others to challenge the Council's dominion. We stand with humanity." The Council's response was immediate and catastrophic. They activated their Doomsday Protocol, attempting to collapse the entire nebula into a massive black hole that would destroy everything in the sector. But they had underestimated the combined knowledge of humanity and its new allies. Using principles derived from Sarah's equations, combined with technologies the coalition had developed in secret over millions of years, they began to contain the collapse. Dr. Rodriguez, working with alien scientists whose species had been waiting centuries for this moment, found a way to channel the Council's own weapon against them. The quantum interference field became a trap, focusing the gravitational collapse into narrow corridors of spacetime that led directly to the Council's main fleet. Their own attempt at destruction became their undoing, as ship after ship was torn apart by the very forces they had unleashed. But victory came at a terrible cost. 3 human ships and 5 coalition vessels were lost in the final moments of the battle. The nebula, while saved from total collapse, would bear the scars of the conflict for millions of years to come. As the quantum storms finally began to subside, Admiral Santos received a transmission from Earth. Dr. Morrison had found something else in Sarah's encoded message, coordinates leading to what appeared to be the Council's central seat of power. "They're not just enforcing cosmic law," he explained, his voice trembling with the implications of his discovery. "They're using it to harvest energy from suppressed civilizations, keeping countless species in technological darkness while they feed off their potential development." Sarah found their entire power structure, and she hid the information in a place she knew they'd never look, inside the quantum signature of her own death. The combined fleet of human and coalition ships regrouped, treating their wounded and repairing their vessels. But there was no question of stopping now. They had the Council on the run for the first time in billions of years, and more importantly, they had something the Council had never truly understood: a reason to fight that went beyond mere power or control. As the fleet prepared for what would become the final battle of the war, Admiral Santos had Sarah's last message displayed on every ship's quantum communication system. "The universe doesn't need guardians. It needs understanding. It needs freedom. Most of all, it needs justice. The coordinates Dr. Morrison had discovered led to a place beyond the galactic core, where the very laws of physics began to break down. There, in the space between spaces, the Council had built their true seat of power. And that's where humanity and its new allies would strike their final blow, not just for Sarah Chen, but for every species that had ever been suppressed in the name of cosmic law. The end was coming, and it would shake the foundations of reality itself. The fabric of spacetime itself seemed to protest as the combined fleet approached the Council's hidden domain. Beyond the galactic core, where quantum mechanics and gravity engaged in an eternal dance, reality became more suggestion than law. Here, in this impossible space, the Council had built their true seat of power, a massive structure that existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions. Sarah would have loved to see this, Dr. Morrison whispered, watching the sensor readings from the HSS Vengeance's quantum lab. She theorized something like this might exist, but even she didn't imagine the full scale of it. The Council's central fortress defied conventional physics. It was a crystalline megastructure that wrapped around a carefully maintained quantum singularity, drawing power from the controlled chaos of spacetime itself. This was where they had regulated the development of countless species for billions of years, where they had decided Sarah Chen's fate, and where humanity would now end their reign. Admiral Santos stood on the bridge, surrounded by holographic displays showing the positions of both human and coalition ships. "All forces report ready," her tactical officer announced. "The coalition's bioships have taken up flanking positions. Our quantum disruptors are charged and synchronized." "Send the demand for surrender," Santos ordered, though everyone knew what the response would be. "Let's do this by the book." The Council's answer came not in words, but in action. The space around their fortress began to twist and distort as ancient defensive systems activated. Reality itself became a weapon, as sections of space began to fold and reshape, threatening to tear apart any ship caught in the dimensional shifts. "They're accessing the quantum singularity," Dr. Rodriguez reported from her station. "Energy readings are off the scale. They're going to try to rewrite the fundamental constants of this entire sector." But this time, humanity was prepared. Using principles derived from Sarah's final equations, combined with technology shared by the coalition, they had developed a defense against even this ultimate weapon. Dr. Morrison activated the quantum resonance field, creating a bubble of stable spacetime around the fleet. "Sarah found their weakness," he announced as the field held against the Council's assault. "They're so focused on controlling reality that they never learn to work with it. Their power comes from forcing their will on the universe. Ours comes from understanding it." The battle that followed would be impossible to describe in conventional terms. Ships moved through dimensions that human minds were never meant to perceive. Weapons fire distorted probability itself. The Council's fortress began to fragment across multiple realities as the combined fleet pressed their attack. In the midst of the chaos, Dr. Rodriguez made a startling discovery. The quantum singularity, it's not just a power source. It's their archive. This is where they've stored the consciousness of everyone they've preserved over the billions of years of their rule. Including Sarah, Admiral Santos realized. "Can we extract them?" "Better than that," Rodriguez replied, her fingers flying over the quantum interface. "Sarah left us instructions for this too. She knew we'd get here eventually. We can not only free the stored consciousness, we can restore them." The Council's response to this revelation was immediate and devastating. The fortress began to implode, attempting to collapse the singularity and take everything with it. But they had underestimated the power of cooperation between free species. Coalition bioships extended fields of living energy, containing the collapse. Human vessels projected quantum stabilization fields. And deep within the fortress's systems, Dr. Rodriguez implemented Sarah's final protocol, a complex sequence of quantum manipulations that began to unravel the Council's control over their archived consciousness. The members of the Cosmic Council themselves finally appeared, their true forms revealed as beings of pure energy, sustained by the power they had stolen from countless suppressed civilizations. "You cannot comprehend the consequences of your actions," they broadcast. Without our guidance, chaos will consume the cosmos. You're wrong, Admiral Santos replied. The universe doesn't need dictators. It needs understanding. It needs freedom. Sarah Chen taught us that. The final moment of the battle came down to a single choice. The Council's fortress was failing, their power breaking. They offered one last bargain. They would surrender, in exchange for maintaining their position as advisors to the galaxy's species. The answer came not from the human fleet, but from the quantum singularity itself. As Dr. Rodriguez completed Sarah's protocol, thousands of stored consciousness began to awaken. Among them was Sarah Chen herself, her mind intact, preserved at the moment of her death. The combined energy of all those awakened minds, all those beings who had been suppressed by the Council, proved to be the final blow. The fortress's quantum matrix overloaded, and the Council's physical forms began to dissolve. The universe was never meant to be controlled. Sarah's consciousness broadcast to all ships. It was meant to be understood, explored, and shared. In the aftermath of the battle, as the Council's fortress collapsed into quantum foam, a new era began. The coalition of free species welcomed humanity as full members. The released consciousness, including Sarah's, were gradually restored to physical form using advanced quantum technology. 1 year later, Dr. James Morrison stood with the restored Sarah Chen in the quantum physics lab at Stanford where it had all begun. The whiteboard still held her original equations, now recognized as the first steps toward a new understanding of cosmic physics. "Did you know?" he asked her. "When you wrote these equations, did you know what they would lead to?" Sarah smiled, running her hand along the familiar formulae. "I knew they were important," she said. "I knew the Council would try to stop humanity from discovering these truths. But I never imagined it would lead to all this." She gestured to the window, where the night sky showed evidence of humanity's new place in the cosmos. Ships from dozens of species moved freely through Earth space, sharing knowledge and culture. The rigid order of the Council had been replaced by something far more valuable: genuine cooperation between free peoples. They thought they could stop the spread of knowledge by eliminating one person, Sarah mused. They never understood that truth, once glimpsed, cannot be unseen. Humanity wasn't ready for this knowledge? Look what we did with it: we freed the galaxy. Above them, the stars seemed to shine brighter in the new age of cosmic freedom. The Council's reign of billions of years had ended, brought down not by superior weapons or technology, but by the one force they could never fully suppress: the undying human spirit of discovery, cooperation, and the eternal quest for justice. The universe was free at last, and the adventure was just beginning.